Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is Attribution in Google Analytics 360 Part 2. Hopefully you guys had the chance to either watch the on-demand webinar for Part 1 or joined us previously. In our last discussion, we essentially walked through the technical details of attribution. We talked about how it works on a functional level and how behind the scenes or behind Google's processing curtain, all of the attribution happens and this is assigned. Today, we're going to talk a lot more about attribution reporting. So today is going to be focused a lot on the configuration of Google Analytics as well as the reporting aspects of Google Analytics. Now, one of the things too that I wanted to point out is, as per the title of this webinar, it is somewhat centric on 360, Google Analytics 360. And I know not everybody has Google Analytics 360. And I'm actually very curious, I'm going to throw up a poll here. Who in the audience right now is currently working in Google Analytics 360, or if you've even not heard of it before? And while you guys are voting and doing that, I don't want you to think because you are on the standard version or you don't have GA360, this isn't going to be valuable to you. I just want to make sure that I point out, certain aspects or features of Google Analytics that are 360 focused. Some things such as like data-driven attribution is going to be a lot different for the standard version. It's not going to be available at all. So actually, we actually have a pretty even split between who has 360 and who doesn't. And I'm glad that you guys are here, even not having the enterprise version, because there's still a ton you could do in terms of attribution. And one of the questions I do get quite a bit is, just what's the difference, right? So, what's the difference between GA standard and GA formerly called premium? But in terms of its applications to attribution, the biggest considerations are the integrations and data-driven attribution, the attribution modeling. So within Google Analytics Standard, you have Google Ads, AdSense, Search Console. Those can be integrated, but with GA360, you can start building out more integrations natively within Google Analytics, which contributes to the attribution models and reporting that we're going to work through today. So those of you that are on the standard version, if you see me pressing buttons or using tools that you haven't seen or heard of before, that may be because it's part of the 360 suite of tools. If you are interested in working in GA360 for your company or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us. We can provide you guys with licenses for that. It is, as I mentioned, it is a commercial, license. So there will be a bill for that. But if you're curious about it, if you want to start working with it, please do reach out. Happy to talk to you about it. One of the things that I do at InfoTrust is I work closely with anyone who does have a GA360 license. Part of that license comes bundled with time with consultants like us, right? So you get a small team of people that will talk to you week to week and help you build out reports and manage the account, that sort of thing. So Google Analytics notoriously has virtually no technical support on the free version, but as part of this, like the premium version, you get a team of folks like myself that jump on and help you out. That being said, I'm actually just going to jump back to the agenda here. We're going to talk a little bit about goal configuration and regular expressions. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. I do hope that most of the folks in this webinar do have a basic understanding of goal configuration. Regular expressions is something I like to talk to mostly because I've done a handful of webinars and a handful of times, and every time I start using regular expressions, I get asked about them in more detail. So I'm just going to talk through a few key ones, show you some tricks and tools that you can use. I'm also going to be dropping links into the Zoom chat, so keep an eye out for that. If I know Chase had just dropped a message in there, so you can see what they're talking about. Feel free to have discussions in there with others if you'd like. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the question and answer section of Zoom. So if you do have a question, please do ask. One of the key benefits to attending a webinar live as opposed to watching it on demand is the ability to ask questions. So please do jump in there and provide me some questions in which I can talk to. Now, I'm also going to be operating out of the Google Analytics demo accounts, which let me just jump over here. I'll link you to the support article. We'll drop it into the chat so you guys can click on that link and use the demo account if you want to match exactly what I'm doing. However, I would actually highly encourage you instead to operate out of your own accounts, because this is where a lot of those valuable questions are going to come from. So cruising through the rest of our agenda too, we're going to talk about the default attribution reporting. We did touch on this in part 1, but I think it's critical to understand what the default attribution model is within Google Analytics when you're working in it. We're going to configure the default channel grouping reporting. Then we're going to dive into multi-channel files in the attribution report section. So you could build whole projects based around attribution. So before I dive into the meat and potatoes of it, if you guys want to connect with me or maybe afterwards, if you have a question, you want some follow-up, go ahead and either add me on LinkedIn or hit me up via email. Happy to chat. I love talking about this stuff. This is a big passion of mine. I've been doing analytics for over 15 years, and I love it every day, mostly because it's so interesting, the information that you can find. And I'm hoping that you guys have the same passion about finding answers for whatever questions you've got. All right, so diving into it, attribution reporting. Let's talk about first goal configurations. This is super important to attribution because you need goals in order to have those reports function, right? The vast majority of the data within Google Analytics is going to be based around the keystone elements of goals. So you're going to need to have goals set up, configured, and properly working before any of these reports are going to make sense. The most common goal you're going to see, and I'll probably talk to the most, is like e-commerce transactions and recording and all that. Now, all a goal is you going into Google Analytics and configuring it in a way that flags data that's coming in as important as a conversion. And what happens is when you do that, when you say, hey, this page view is a goal conversion, hey, this event, the number of page depth, when you build out these goals, it blossoms into a whole host of additional metrics that are associated with it. So you get, funnel steps, you get, all the attribution reports start to work. You get goal conversions numbers, that sort of thing. So building out your goal configuration is monumentally important to any GA configuration. Now, not all goals have to be major conversions. Not everything has to be, like sold a product or converted them to a client or anything like that. You can have smaller level conversions in the mix. Usually those for me are like engagement ones. Like they visited X number of pages. That's important for somebody who's like a publisher or something like that has content they want people to consume. That's a really great brand awareness goal, as having engagement goals. But generally, that's not that's not going to be the moneymaker for you. So you have 20 goals per view, which sounds limited, but in reality, they're pretty robust in terms of their applications. When you think about goals, I want you to instead don't think about the tech to begin with. Think about your strategic objectives and build the goals based around those strategic objectives. For example, selling a product, you've got the e-commerce ones. So those will be bundled into a goal. Contact us, having somebody reach out and connect with your sales team or something like that. Now, Where these regular expressions are going to be particularly valuable is generally going to be around goal creation with regard to multiple different pages that essentially serve the same strategic purpose. All right. Now, I had mentioned to you contact us, right? In the event that you have multiple different contact forms that serve essentially the same strategic purpose, but they live on different pages, you're not going to want to create one goal per contact form, because what that's going to do is it's going to fragment your conversions and GA. You're going to want to have one goal that's based around that strategic purpose and use regular expressions to essentially encompass all of the pages that it's involved. So for example, I gave a training before to a group, and someone in the group worked for a company that sold luxury airplanes, which is a really cool company, right? It was really cool to see, but they had, very limited clientele. Obviously, not all of us can buy luxury airplanes. And they had different models to their airplanes. And on every single page of each different airplane type, they had a contact form that all went to the same guy, it all went to the same sales team. Now, how that user previously, how that attendee had previously configured was that they had created one goal per contact form per page. This is where essentially regular expressions are going to close that gap. So instead of having like the 5 goals for one for each plane, we would have one goal that would have multiple different pages on the page view. So one of the tools that I like to use is this website here. It's a great testing tool. I'm going to drop this in the chat as well. Completely free to use. It's online. It's great because it's shareable. So when you do build out a regular expression, you can work with it. So for example, in what I mentioned, so we have form1.html, we have form2.html, we have form3.html, right? So instead of creating three goals, one for each form, we can essentially build a regular expression in that goal that would encompass that. And how we would do that would be a couple different ways. And one of the things that I would use the most in terms of meta characters and regular expressions is this pipe. So it's this vertical bar. It's going to live in different places on your keyboards, but for me, it's right above my enter key. But essentially, you can create this or that or that. So as you can see on this site that we're using to test this, anything that's highlighted will essentially be flagged as valuable, right? This will say this matches, so this connects. So if we have form.aspx and it's a different page, that's not going to match because it doesn't quite fit, and maybe that's by design. When you're working in regular expressions, there's a handful of meta characters that are associated with it, which are essentially what these are on the left here. Anytime you use a period, it matches any single character, so it's going to fill the gap. It's essentially a wild card. A lot of you have used a form of regular expressions when you're looking in your computer's file structure, like .star, give me everything, that sort of thing. It's the exact same concept. When you build a regular expression, you're essentially building a recipe or template for that string to match. The star matches 0 or more of the previous item, so pretty much the previous characters any number of times. So you can see it would match all of these. The pipe, which is this vertical bar. This is something you're going to use quite a bit. And I would absolutely recommend getting very comfortable with the pipe at least. And I'll show you one of the sections that this is pretty important. This slash, I can't remember if it's a forward slash or backslash or what, but this slash is an escape. Now this is very important because what this does is it says, take the next character literally. So we have mysite.com. That dot is not the meta character of match anything. It's an actual dot. It's an actual period. So you're essentially putting a slash in front of it and saying, take this next character literally. The caret, which is the bottom one here, is that vertical, almost a triangle, right? It's essentially, this is the start of the string. So this is what it starts with. You don't always have to include this. You don't always have to include any of these. Now, when I'm building this out too, some of you that are more well-versed in regular expressions noted that this is rather inelegant, right? we can do better. We can minimize this, that sort of thing. But I don't want the new folks to regular expressions to let that deter you. I want you, like, if you build a simple expression that works, fantastic, stick with it. But how we can make this better, we could do a few things, right? We noticed that 1, 2, 3 is essentially something that's always the same, right? We actually forgot to escape those dots, so we want to make sure we escape that. But if we wanted, we can make a regular expression that didn't use any of the or statements, but replace that 1 with a dot. So now it matches all of those. We can also, too, beyond the or statements, we can do this any number of ways so long as it matches the recipe. So we have these two, for example. Let's say we don't want form 3 to match. So what we might do is shrink this down and build a little group right in here that says 1 or 2. And that brings me to grouping. So anytime you use these parentheses, you are grouping them together. It's a great way to make and or statements or nest statements into themselves, right? So this, for example, will work for these two, et cetera, et cetera. This question mark too, this is one that I use more often as well. So you've got grouping, you've got the question mark. The question mark essentially says the previous item, it doesn't have to match, it's somewhat optional, right? So for example, in this, it's a compensation for the use in color for our friends overseas. It's also great for groups, right? So like this whole group, if I put a question mark right here, it essentially says that's optional. So what that'll mean is if we do this, it doesn't even have to have a number. It can and it will match. It doesn't have to have that number, but that's what that question mark does. Now these can get very complicated and there's a lot of more meta characters than what I'm presenting here. I would highly recommend that you spend a little time working with these and just getting comfortable using them. It's a lot like learning to write with a different hand when you start doing this, because it can be a bit uncomfortable and confusing. But don't let that deter you. Now we're going to be using regular expressions throughout the day, and I'll walk you through what I'm building and why. Most notably in the goal creation, which we just talked about. Also, when it comes to like building out the default channel groupings, that sort of thing, it's going to be important to know what like these pipes are and that sort of thing. But please do ask any questions if you need a regular expression, things like that. Regular expressions are very common in development and developers, not so much in marketing and analytics. So if you do have a development team, I think how I learned this, I initially went to a brick and mortar bookstore, and I was like, I'm going to look up, or I'm going to get a book on regular expressions. And I wasn't able to find one that was less than like 500 pages. I was like, forget this. So I drove across the street, I went to the liquor store, I got a case of beer, and I made a developer friend. And that's essentially how I learned. I worked with folks who were much more familiar, and they kind of showed me the ropes out of the gates. So, don't be shy asking your developer friends if they can build a regular expression that matches like what you give them. It's very much a love-hate relationship, and eventually you'll get used to using these. So beyond regular expressions, let's talk a little bit about the default attribution model. This was something that, well, actually, before I move on from that, I see there's a question. If we combine 3 different goals in one single goal using regular expressions, can we still report on this separately? Yes. So within the reports, let's say that we have those 3 forms, right? So form 1, form 2, form 3. We can, if we'd like, and again, this is actually in the demo account. You see Google Merchandise Store. This is bogus data, that sort of thing. Under the goals section here, there's goal URLs. So when a user converts their session, you will see the completion location. So goal completion location is one of those dimensions that comes blossoming out of the configuration here. So in this report, the way that we would have this goal that we have configured, well, the way that it is right now, we would see these 3 pages showing up as part of the conversions. Oh, where did I go? Sorry, I have a lot of tabs open because I'm going to show you all of them, right? So you would see those in here. You can also itemize, by drilling down and clicking on it, that sort of thing. Again, it's a great way to slice and dice it by the page if pages is relevant. Most of the time, the pages that they're converting on is more of a, I don't want to say an afterthought, depending on how you do it, but I think the strategic objective is a little bit more to know. So the next question, we need to filter by using goal option at the top. So goal option, and this is actually something I'll get to, and this is with all conversion reports and all attribution reports. This is almost, I would say, my golden rule for working in the conversion reports here. This goal option, this drop down here, allows you to select what goal you're reviewing, right? So right now I'm selecting all goals, which includes purchase completions, engaged users, registration, entered checkout. When you build out goals, they're gonna, like I said, they're gonna be different, have different strategic value. A purchase completed is not going to be the same as registrations in terms of value. So anytime you're looking at any of these conversion reports, make sure, and I'll just go to overview because it appears everywhere, that you select the goal that is applicable to whatever analysis you're doing. Don't fall into the trap of always looking at all goals, because conversions are not created equal depending on how you have these built out. And you should have a wide array of goals configured that reach a wide array of strategic objectives. So if I do purchase completed, it's going to drop the numbers down quite a bit and that sort of thing, but it's of a single strategic value. So these are great questions. Hopefully that helps. Any other questions around like goal creation, regular expressions? Nope. Okay. So let's mark those as completed. Cool. Okay. So when it comes to goal creation, again, I don't want to spend too much time on goal creation, mostly because it's something that's probably cover elsewhere a little bit better. But under these new goals here, you have a bunch of different options. Destination is essentially if they reach a certain page, it'll flag it as a goal. Duration, how long they're on the site in terms of time. Pages or screens per session. This is essentially page depth. And then finally an event. Now an event, events are not collected by default. You have to change that within your implementation. And again, if the data isn't there, if you're not collecting it, there's no way for you to build a conversion on it. Now, if we look at destination, for example, we have equals to begins with a regular expression. We could essentially just take the regular expression we crafted into here and drop it into our destination here as well. You can create funnels in this, and these, they don't tell you, but they actually do take regular expressions. So you could build out true funnels if you'd like in here using that or statement. So this or that, or whatever, right? So make sure that you're using regular expressions within there. If you are having problems with your goals converting properly, 9 times out of 10, I find that the regular expression that was created was incorrect. I would highly recommend, before you create a destination goal, one of the tricks that I do is I navigate over to the behavior, the site content reports, and go to all pages. So this will show you all of the page views that are happening on there. If you click advanced over here, you can essentially just take that regular expression you created, drop it into there and apply that. Any of the pages that are going to show up in this report would be pages that things are converting on. So as you're building these out and testing these regular expressions, grab it from whatever you're developing it in and drop it into this little search box with the regular expressions. So essentially you're emulating what the goal is going to be detecting. This is a great way to vet two main things. Is it going to convert at all on the pages I want? And two, is it going to convert on pages I don't want? So do I have to accommodate or change my regular expression to exclude different pages that this isn't relevant to? So on and so forth. So great way to test it. So moving on from goals, the default attribution model, when you have goals configured and they're collecting and they're processing and data is being flagged in, the goals that the users are triggering happen at the session level, right? So when I arrive on your sites, I come from some place, which again is the root of attribution. I convert in some way, and that conversion, the goal I created, is attributed to the source or channel of the session. Again, it's who gets credit. Now, outside of the multi-channel funnels, the other reports default to the last non-direct interaction attribution model. This essentially means so long as the user did not come from direct, that most immediate channel will get all of the credits. And I provided some examples here. So if a user has 3 sessions, organic, paid campaign, and direct, under the default attribution model, the paid campaign will receive 100% of the credit for the conversion. And the way that this is weighted in these reports is going to be 100%. There will be one channel or source or medium that will get all of the credit for the conversion. The standard reports that you work in, everything that's from audience acquisition to behavior is going to be on that last non-direct interaction. And it's going to weight 100% of the credit to the last non-direct interaction. In the other examples here, if I go organic, paid campaign, direct, it doesn't matter. The last non-direct interaction, which is paid campaign, will get all of the credit. And then finally, in this last situation, organic, paid campaign, direct, social. So social got all of the credit because it was, again, it's not direct, but it's the last interaction. So when you are looking in your, sorry, I'm going crazy with tabs here, your acquisition reports, for example, all traffic in the channels, this is the attribution model that it is operating on. So you're going to see organic search, and you will see direct in there. There will be instances where users are going to exclusively have direct channel attribution because they've only come in from direct. These are more commonly going to be actually people who cleared their cookies or jumped on from a different device, and you didn't. There's no like user tracking, that sort of thing. But you see, like organic search, for example, is getting 13 purchase complete conversions, goal 1 completed, right? This doesn't mean that the other channels didn't play a part in it, but in this report, it's getting all of the last click value. So question, with your experience, do you find that direct should be the channel bringing more people to the site, or does it mean that bad rules are set up? Direct doesn't mean that bad rules are set up. Usually other means that bad rules are set up, and which we can talk to. Direct is, as we talked about in part 1, direct is actually, the way that this is classified is it's the lack of an attributable source. So when all that technical stuff happens, if it finds nothing, what ends up happening is it attributes it to direct. So direct can sometimes be indicative of a technical problem. So if attribution is lost at some point, it can be classified as direct. Most commonly, if you see a spike in direct traffic that corresponds to marketing campaigns, it's generally going to be like a technical problem. Do you often see direct at the top? Yes and no. Direct arriving at the top is going to generally be because of brand awareness, right? Because you work for a company or you're looking in data that is essentially people know. Like I think everybody has heard of Disney or or Coke or something like that. So if you have one of those brands that people are knowledgeable of, they're going to end up on your site directly as opposed to perhaps a search. Because I go to Disney.com, I'm going to go right there because I know Disney.com. Other times too, direct can be because of technical items, but it will be much more common for larger companies with a high brand presence than it will be for smaller companies that are a bit more niche. So it ebbs and flows based on the company. How would you troubleshoot? How would I troubleshoot direct traffic? I did talk about that a bit more in depth on the part one. If you, we can provide you guys with a link to the part one of this discussion. Again, I don't want to dive too deep into the technical because I want to make sure that I leave time for all the reporting. Yeah, absolutely check out part one. I talk about direct traffic quite a bit. Okay, so that being said, any questions about the default attribution model, the last non-direct interaction? I'll just pause for a moment here. And these are great questions, guys. Don't worry about hijacking you or anything like that. I will make sure that keep us on track. So how do you recommend excluding internal employee traffic with an all remote workforce where VPN isn't always required? That's a bit of a different discussion. That's going to be around like view filters, which doesn't have to deal too much, unfortunately, with attribution. I am more than happy to answer that question if you want to reach out to the contact information I provided. For today's call, I just we need, again, just to stay a bit more focused on attribution. Anything else about the default attribution model? Cool. Okay. Let's talk about the default channel grouping. We touched on it just a little bit, with the direct and that other. This channel grouping or any channel groupings that you create via customization is something that you have the ability to modify. The default channel grouping, the primary dimension that we jumped to immediately, is something that is pushed out to everybody that is looking in this report, right? So when you update the default channel grouping, you're going to update it for everybody. And when you do so, you're going to need, I'm going to cancel out of this crazy goal here. You're going to need administrative access to the account. You'll need to be able to edit it. But if you come into the account property view, at the view level, you can go into channel settings and go to channel grouping. Now, you can create multiple different types of channel grouping. So if I look here, this little drop down actually show a different one here as well. So this is something that's available. However, one of the advantages to editing the default one is that the default one is the easiest one to push out downstream to other services such as like Data Studio. So if you're building a marketing channel dashboard for your team in Data Studio, it's going to leverage the default channel grouping much more cohesively than other channel groupings that you create. So for example, if I create a second channel grouping, all those services downstream won't actually see it. And unfortunately, that's a limitation of the API. There's also too, most folks don't look at this dropdown. They don't click this little arrow. It's very easy to miss. So nesting, valuable channel groupings within here, sometimes newer users aren't going to notice them and not going to use them, right? And one of the items that I briefly touched on was this other bucket. Now, this other bucket in the channel groupings or the channels, it's like Google doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know how to classify it. It doesn't know what that source and medium means. So like if we click on this to drill down, this is again the demo account, we see it's not set. So it doesn't know what to do with that, which is, I was hoping for something a little bit more real world, but again, this is just garbage data from the merchandise store. But if you want, if you see a rise in your other channel, and honestly, if you guys are following along in your own data, please go to your channels report, acquisition, all traffic and channels. And if you see a very big other row, this section is going to be particularly important to you, because right now, when it comes to looking at this report and using the channels and the attribution for them, it's going to be very difficult to classify it because everything's going to be lumped together. So if you have, for example, unique UTM parameters for like billboards and flyers and maybe a kiosk at the mall or something like that, or a point of sale system, if you didn't go in and teach Google Analytics how to consume that and attribute that to the proper channel, that other is going to somewhat obscure. There's going to be a bit of a fog of war around the attribution for that. And how you would resolve that is essentially by coming in here and updating or building out a new channel group. And in order to update this, it's pretty straightforward. And it also leverages regular expressions. So I'm adding in the default one. You can see like these are all the system defined ones. You can create completely new channels if you'd like. So if you have, for example, influencers, you can come in here and create a rule around influencers. So any of these dimensions that are available to you for building this out. So for example, if you have medium, and we'll say influ, that's just what you guys chose for the medium, and then choose a color and then done, apply that. Something also to keep in mind when building out these channels, sequence is important. So it will run its check to see if it matches the rule that you apply here. If it does not, it goes to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, so on and so forth. So they do cascade. A lot of you too are going to be potentially coming in here and editing one of the system defined ones. This used to be a little bit more spelled out. It's pretty funny. It's basically like system defined social. Like a lot of questions I get are around like, well, how is it social? What is it determining it on? I know just from experience that this is from the social network dimension. But if you ever want to dissect what this means, this is not too enlightening on its own. You could actually go into the conversions, the multi-channel funnels, any one of these reports, and take a look at the channel grouping. So if I do copy custom, oh, I just did a blank one. So like this one here, again, same channel grouping and all that, but these actually spell it out. So social exact. So if you guys are ever curious about what's happening under the hood and behind that dropdown, you can always come into the multi-channel funnels and we'll revisit this when we talk about this particular section. Okay, so customizing these, anytime if you're looking in your report, you see a big other bucket, drill down into it, click it as I have, and come in here and edit these to make sure that they're properly attributed to the channel that they fit in. Regular expressions do fit here. You can use and or statements based on what's in here. I would actually recommend, if you are doing this, that you copy the default channel grouping and call it like updated or testing or whatever. Conduct your configuration, validate it's what you like and what you want, and then roll that change into the default channel grouping. That will change it for everybody. Okay, so I'll just take a breath and see about the questions here. Under other Instagram coming through a source, can we assume this is social? That depends. I would have to do a little bit more investigation. When when you have a source and a medium and campaign and all that, that could be the result of manual UTM tagging. So you can classify it as social, you can classify it potentially as an influencer in a brand new channel, so on and so forth. So if I open this up, I can see like social, and then we've got like paid search. You're going to start asking yourself questions like, Facebook has search, and when you search in Facebook, you can present ads to those users. Is that considered paid search, right? I see it very common for social to be branched into social or an organic social. So instead of just social networks being lumped into the same channel, that's divided by naturally occurring traffic from those and users sharing it, or paid efforts. We also have paid search. We have display. Sometimes it's helpful to divide up like different key sources. Like if you are investing in Bing, Yahoo, and Google, and you want those to be separate channels as opposed to just paid search, you absolutely can do that. So you can base these channels on whatever is custom to you. They're very flexible in terms of what you can do. Let's see. So I have a lot under other from my Morningstar ads, but I did tag them via UTM parameters. Do you recommend I put them under other paid advertising? When it comes to naming these, when it comes to classifying these, I would recommend just sticking with whatever nomenclature you guys have internally. So if you call that offline, if you call that newspaper or articles or periodical, whatever it may be, you absolutely could lump it into other advertising if that's how you want to view it. But I think one of the joys of having the ability to customize this is to name it whatever fits with your institution, right? So other advertising is pretty generic, but create a channel that is immediately understandable to people within your organization as to what it is. The sky's the limit in terms of the way that you can customize this. Now, I think as part of, I'm going to cancel out of this, and I'm going to go to acquisition, all traffic channels report again. And I believe the demo account has one that's configured just for testing. So you see like branded paid search and generic paid search, they had branched this out. So I would imagine if you look in the configuration of this, I don't have admin access to this account, of course. They probably have in here listed out, branded words or in the keywords dimension that they're paid for, so they could branch those into two separate ones. And again, this little drop down, this is everybody's going to see that, but most people are going to go to the default channel grouping. And and what's in this drop down, the other channels that you create are not necessarily going to be achievable downstream, like on business intelligence tools. So keep that in mind. These are great questions, guys. I'm going to pause real fast to see if you have any more, just to make sure that I got addressed them all before I jump into the next area here, which is going to be multi-channel funnels. So while you guys are thinking through some questions you've got here, just a reminder, this acquisition report, the channels that we're creating and classifying, still under that last non-direct interaction model. So it's still binary. It's still 100% of the credit is going towards one of these channels. Okay, no more questions. So I'm going to jump into multi-channel funnels. This is a fantastic group of reports. And interestingly enough, this used to be a, well, now it's called GA360, but used to be a Google Analytics Premium only report, right? So this is something that was only exclusively available under the commercial license, but eventually they rolled it out to everybody because honestly, it's the best way to think about attribution and the way that your marketing machine works. Because well, think about you as a user, how you shop for things. Let's say you're buying like a new $100 widget, right? You're gonna do a search online. You're gonna click an ad. You're gonna maybe take a few days to think it over. And I come back because a social ad pulled you in and there's a sale going on, something like that. There are a whole bunch of elements in play that are different marketing channels, and understanding the contribution and where those channels fit into the conversion is essentially what the multi-channel funnels reporting is going to do for you. So this is a great set of reports. And once again, the golden rule, make sure you're looking at one conversion type when you're doing this. I am going to break my rule just so that we have a bit more data in there. But please, if you are following along on your own, make sure that you're looking at one that has the same strategic value or purpose if you're going to look at goals. And you can, for example, select multiple ones, right? So if I turn this one off, turn off purchase completed. So engaged users and registrations, maybe I am doing some analysis that would classify these as close enough strategy-wise, so I would keep them together. It's completely up to you. But like I said, I'm gonna break my rule and I'm gonna turn them all on. Apply that. So under the overview, there's this neat little Venn diagram that does show up. This is a pretty neat visual, sort of. It's a really great screen grab for a presentation, a great little gateway into the conversation about the overlap of your channels. Again, that's kind of where the buck stops in terms of the value here. You're not probably necessarily going to be using this too much in intense analysis, mostly because it's limited in terms of the visual, but it is cool. It's a great screen grab. The assisted conversions reports. This one here is probably, in my opinion, aside from the model comparison tool, the most valuable information that you're going to have, because it gives a quantitative value to the contributions of different channels. So an assisted conversion is essentially how many times that particular channel has contributed to the conversions that you are currently looking at. So for example, direct has 380 assisted conversions. Now, this isn't a one-to-one either. For every one conversion, there's not one assisted conversion. It's one to many. So if direct, referral, or organic search all contributed to a single conversion, each one of those would get an assisted conversion as a result. This is a great report to look at to find just quickly the unsung heroes of your marketing machine. It's very common to see social in here quite a bit. It also depends on what sort of goals you're looking at and products you're selling. So for example, if you are selling like Airbnb time and on luxury beach houses, there's gonna be a big consideration phase. People aren't gonna click on a Facebook ad and spend $1,000. It just generally doesn't happen. But you're going to see how those underdogs contribute to the overall. We have a question here. Conversion e-commerce is the same as place an order, so we wouldn't need a goal for place an order. So this is just the demo account. I didn't build this out, but I actually usually do create both a goal conversion and use the e-commerce tools, mostly so that you can have your cake and eat it too when it comes to the reporting, right? So you have this whole beautiful section of e-commerce in here with a bunch of great reports. And you also have this one here. So if you do them both, you can leverage both styles. So like the goal flow report is a really cool visualization to look at. Sometimes that's the visualization you want to use. So honestly, there's really no harm in having both of them. And I personally like having both of them. Plus two, sometimes depending on how your organization is set up, in the event that you have maybe an agency that you do not want to be aware of the e-commerce aspects of what you're working on, like the dollar value, you just want to know if did they not complete a purchase, you can create a goal around that and just not provide them the e-commerce information. And I know, well, the disadvantage, right, is you're eating up a goal, but there's 20 goals. Some of the largest organizations in the world that I've worked with do not hit that 20 goal limit, mostly because you can bundle those, again, using regular expressions into the same strategic goals. In addition, it's 20 goals per view. So you have, I think, 25 views per web property, 50 web properties per account, and 1,000 accounts per user. So if my math is correct, that's like a billion trillion goals. So you have more than it kind of lets on. Plus too, like most companies are going to have like 20 strategic objectives. Okay, so in order to use this, you have the MCF channel grouping, which is not the same as the default channel grouping, right? So in the MCF channel grouping, the concept of channel groupings comes from these reports. It originated here and then it permeated up into acquisition. So they're not necessarily one and the same. And when you build out these channel groupings, they're very similar to the way that advanced segments work, right? So if I build out a channel grouping in here, as I showed before, like this is custom to me. This goes into my toolbox as a user. So with that being created, I can get as creative or as itemized as I want with any of these. And then it essentially applies to whatever I'm looking at. So for example, if I'm, let's say I'm the social media manager, I really want to know, I'm working with LinkedIn, with Twitter, with Instagram, with Facebook, and I don't care about referral traffic or SEO or organic traffic. It's just, it's not in my, it's not in my line of sight. I don't want to mess with it. So I can come in here, I can create my own channel groupings and divide up each one of those social networks and show how they're assisting. So let's see, Facebook had the most assists and Instagram had the most last direct clicks, that sort of thing. So a great way to view this. You can also divide this up by different, like more common channels, such as the source and medium, and a few others that are listed here. And I'll let you guys kind of do your own exploring. You can also set the look back window here. The max is 90 days. And then the interaction types, which rich media is eventually being retired by clicks, impressions, direct, so on and so forth. So like, for example, between impression and click, if you have display advertising going, you want to make sure that impressions count as contributions to a conversion. You want to make sure that you have something like that checked. So for example, I cruise by a display ad. I don't click on it, but it's impressed upon me. That would be considered here as an assist in that instance. The top conversion paths. This essentially answers the question of like sequence. So quantity and sequence. So for example, in this demo account, organic search and direct is the number one in terms of volume of conversions, and looks like the same conversion value too, right? This is also too, this is start to show more of the value of direct. With that last non-direct interaction, direct sometimes gets overshadowed by channels preceding it. So for example, if I am trying to get brand awareness, or I'm motivating people to come directly to the page, it will essentially let's say like I had an initiative where I wanted people to bookmark my page and come back direct. This will show me how successful I am, because if we just looked in these other reports, the acquisition reports, it would say organic search has all the credit for these 69 conversions. So now I know that direct is actually the last interaction with those folks. It was the last item that they did. So the attribution model here is essentially, it's just, it's not really, these aren't weighted. This is just showing sequence. So it's just like the model, attribution models, which we'll get to here in the model comparison tool, weight certain steps. This just tells you the step without weighting it. This is just the sequence of items that are happening. I'm sorry, I'm addressing a question. Time lag. So this will tell you the number of days in which it takes to convert. The more expensive your product, the bigger the consideration phase. So do bear that in mind. With this report too, this is also contingent on consistency of users and sessions. If I go to your website and I clear my cookies and then come back, that may fragment the number of days simply because of the tech. There's a ways you can alleviate this by using those GA360 integrations to get a better picture and to leverage Google's user profile of that person. Additionally to different functionality, which we talked about in part 1, can help alleviate or create more accuracy in these reports. Path length. This is a great place to start too if you have a top level question about like, okay, how many interactions does it take for a user to convert? So path length and interactions, it gives a nice quantitative number. You can say, okay, commonly takes this number of people to get this much conversion value. Great way to think about it. And then finally, the model comparison tool, which is likely going to be one of the most complex aspects of attribution models, because what this allows you to do is it allows you to take all of the models that are available, including ones that you can custom create, and apply it to the traffic that you're seeing in the channels. I did not mean to click that. Let's go back out. So for example, last interaction versus last non-direct click, which is a default model for all of the other reports. If I enabled both of these and compared the two, I can actually see the difference that this would make in terms of what model is being applied or layered onto it. So using the model comparison tool, what this allows you to do is have a better understanding of essentially, allow you to weight differently the position and the value of certain channels. So for example, like last interaction and first interaction. First interaction is a really great model to look at when you're trying to demonstrate the value around something like, again, I keep picking on social, but social is good for brand awareness, putting yourself in front of folks. A first interaction, like under this model, something like email would do terrible, because a first interaction email is just, that's called spam. So, you can articulate that and you can visualize that by showing the delta between these, like conversions, that sort of thing. You do have the ability to create your own custom model. And this is pretty cool. It allows you to essentially build out a formula of a model that you want to apply. Now you can also you can view these in a vacuum. You don't have to necessarily compare them if you don't want to. You can apply the different interactions and take a look here, but again, the most valuable aspect is the comparison of it. So with this, the baseline model is linear, but you can do something like position-based, where the first and the last interaction are weighted heavier. So this assigns it percentages, which is, again, saying that the very first interaction with your brand is just as important as the last interaction, and the middle interactions are kind of just the meat and potatoes, not going to weight that entirely. You can also adjust credit for impressions. I talked to you before about if I see a banner ad or something like that, what'll end up happening is you can diminish the value of it if you want. You can actually go down to like, just do a half, right? So weighting it as, just half as opposed to like a full credit, maybe because they didn't click on it. It's not as valuable to you. Adjust credit based on user engagement. So you can do it based on time on site and page depth. So if they jumped in and they jumped out and it's not good, then you can weight it less. And then finally, custom credit rules, which is, I'm sure you're familiar now with this sort of include interface, that sort of thing. So if you wanted to weight it on position or path, any sort of option, there's a lot of different versatility you can here. If you jump in here, and this can get pretty complicated, I know I'm cruising pretty fast because we're low on time, but within this, you also have the ability to import from the gallery. If you're running low on ideas, if you want to see what other professionals have done, jump in here. There's a lot of great stuff in here. I know Avinash is a popular one that you can come in here and apply his logic to it just to see what other professionals are doing in this space. So one last section here I want to show you, and then I will hang out as long as you guys have questions. It's no problem. I don't mind. I am trying to be conscious of everybody's time. But is the attribution projects, right? So you may have seen this, and you have to create this as a separate instance. So you'll have to essentially build it out. Now, this is very similar to the multi-channel funnels. But it has its pros and cons, and it has more pros than cons. one of the aspects that I absolutely love about building an attribution project around this is the fact that when you're looking at the weighting of this path, you can see the attribution model in action in terms of who it's attributing the success to. So right now the attribution model is set to data driven, and this is a Google Analytics 360 feature. It's essentially using some logic based on your integrations and what it knows to weight the steps differently, right? So you can actually see like the breakdown of some of the percentages. And this one here is actually, to me, is quite interesting, right? So we have 2 referrals and direct. Now, this referral right here, under the previous, like again, under the default, we receive 100% of the credit. But what this is doing is it's showing you, hey, I'm saying that this referral should receive 71% of the credit based on the logic in the data-driven attribution, and this will receive 29%. So you start incorporating sequence into the weight of the value of that traffic. Now, if I click on Edit Report here, I can apply different attribution models here. So let's look at, for example, position-based. And you'll see some of these are branching out, right? So referral and organic search, how it's split. Because position-based, as we saw, it gives most of the weight to the front and most of the weight to the last and a little bit of the weight to what's in between. So you start seeing, this doesn't actually incorporate direct into it. Highly encourage you guys to play around with it. Don't forget to make sure your date span is correct. Don't forget to make sure that you're looking at appropriate conversions for the questions you've got. And one of the strongest points to this report, and I'm not going to click on all of these because it's very similar to what we talked about, was under the project's connected properties, you have the ability to link together multiple different data sets into the attribution model. So if under your account you have multiple different web properties, you can actually enable or attach them to this report to start understanding those goals and start molding it all together. So this is a really good way if you belong to an organization that has multiple different web properties for the reason that maybe it's global or there's more websites or assets associated with it. You can save yourself a lot of clicking and legwork by building out an attribution report to come in here and see a holistic view of all of your web properties in a single report, and then build out a marketing strategy. So this report style really excels at people in positions where they need to oversee multiple brands or multiple sites. So I highly recommend venturing into this. I will warn you guys that this is I believe this is still in beta. So it is subject to change. It may go away. It hopefully won't. I think this is awesome. One of the other cons I didn't point out here is you notice that there are a handful of different attribution models. You see non-direct is applied, right? There's no custom ones in here, so all that cool stuff you can do in terms of building out your own attribution model or import it. I forgot where the tab was, but you get the idea. It isn't available here. I would hope down the line it's going to be. I would imagine it does. But that's one of the cons. But again, the pros way outweigh the cons in this regard. So where's the attribution project? Just up at the top, you have to create it. You have to create it like you were creating a view or something like that. I don't want to click on this. I don't want to reveal too much of what accounts I'm attached to. But just at the top left here, click down here and create a new attribution project. And it'll ask you a handful of questions in terms of building that out. Something I also want to point out too, the number of touch points. You can change this to like 1. Like if you want to know the single interactions, you can change that down as well. Okay, so I know we covered a whole bunch of ground in a very short amount of time, but questions. What questions do you guys have? What would you like to hear about? So while you guys are drumming up some of the questions, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of using different attribution models. So last interaction puts all of the emphasis on the last item. So if you belong to an organization that essentially says the last thing they did is should receive that credit, this would include direct. So that's a good model to work with or base it against. Last non-direct. So this is the default model. So if you want to emulate the default model and such as like that, things like the the attribution products. You can choose that. Last, Google Ads click. This is especially interesting to those of you that are in the media buy space. You can jump in there and take a look there. The first interaction, again, within your organization, if it's super important, if you're if you're trying to acquire new customers into your cycle, taking a look at the first interaction model against your traffic is a great way to show success in that regard. So let's say, the C-suite folks go, hey, we want new people that have never been exposed to our brand before. Well, you can turn on first interaction as the attribution model, show how the different channels are performing against that specific task. Linear, weights everything easily, good for general brand awareness sort of thing. Time decay, so this places over time, as you can see actually like the little notches, more weight goes into more recent interactions. So there's like a recency bias built into this model. And then position based, again, first and last is most important. Where can we see the first interaction report again, where you've mentioned social good, email bad? Yeah, so if you go into a couple different ways you can look at this. If you go into the multi-channel funnels, I'll go into like model comparison tool. We can turn on the first interaction as what we're looking at here to change the weighting. So the first interaction conversion value, you can compare it versus a different one to see that like the deltas between them. Additionally, too, if we go under assisted conversions, we can change this up here. I didn't mention this, but these are different metric groups. So if you look down here in these columns, we can change it to the first interaction analysis. So a great way to understand first interaction, so first click conversions. So what we've done in this report is we swapped it from the last one to the first one. So if that very first item is important to you, you can totally jump in there. Data-driven attribution is missing on this breakdown. Yes, this is the demo account. This is why. This is not a 360 account. Okay, guys. I know we're 11 minutes past. Happy to keep chatting. If you have additional items, there is a follow-up poll that's we jumped up. So if you're interested in connecting with us, either about GA360, about anything that we do here at InfoTrust, we offer quite a slew of services. So feel free to hit yes, and we're happy to connect if we haven't already. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for listening to me talk at you for quite some time. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email. I know I deferred some of the questions to part one, so check that out. I also deferred some of the questions that were a little bit off topic, but you have my email, you have my LinkedIn. Ask me there. I will follow up with you. I will answer you. So go ahead and connect. But guys, thank you so much again, and have a great rest of your week.